Good afternoon, YouTube. Today's video is going to be something a little different. I'm starting to create a little bit more content on just AS3 in itself. And so on my YouTube page, traditionally I've been doing a lot of CIS content. I'm going to continue doing that content. In fact, I've got some videos or some good videos that I want to publish in the up and coming weeks, probably post Thanksgiving. We're going to be starting to work on OpenShift 4.12. There's a lot of stuff there. I met with Red Hat this week. There's some great integration, some good stuff I want to show specifically around what we're doing with next-gen routes. Maybe talk a little bit about API Gateway, etc. But today what I want to focus on is a new repo that I've created specifically for AS3 and what's really cool around AS3. What are we doing with AS3? So send me examples of kind of what you want to see. Do you want to see something like AS3 troubleshooting? How do you configure something? What's the optimal way to do something? Kind of let me know so I have some ideas on potentially what kind of demos, what kind of information you'd like to see. So if we take a look at this repo that I've just created, I've actually created a new user guide. This is how to create a DNS listener with AS3. But here what I've created is a document that can really talk about some of the changes that I've been working on with regards to configuring GTM plus LTM using AS3. Now, we've made some changes in AS3 4.0. So we just released AS3 41 last week. But with 4.0, we made some changes. And these changes are actually for the good. These changes are going to get implemented in CIS. These changes also came from a couple of the solution architects working with a couple of you folks out in the community. So I want to talk about some of the changes. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to automate or provision big IP and configure both the wide IP GTM as well as the LTM within a single declaration. And this is really preferred. When AS3 first started supporting GTM, a lot of the objects were configured in common. And preferably, I would really not configure application type content in common. The only thing that we should define in common should be our data center, our server, and our reference to the pool. That should be it. Everything else should be configured in its own partition. In this case, maybe I have a tenant or a partition called Nginx because that's the application that I'm deploying, right? So here I'm actually deploying an Nginx ingress app or an Nginx ingress controller on my cluster. So let's take a look at a big IP. So I've got a big IP right here, and it's an HA cluster. You'll see right here, I've got an OpenShift tenant, which I'm actually not going to use. If I go onto DNS, I have nothing. I have no DNS data centers, and I have no data DNS servers. Now, traditionally, this could be created manually. My recommendation is create this using an AS3 declaration and declare these objects to common. That's all. So let's take a look at what that would look like. If I go back here to my example, you can kind of see what I'm doing is I have this YAML file, and we can just call it common. I am creating it to the common, and I am creating something called a default data center. You can call it anything you want. I am then creating inside my default data center a server called ocpf5demo.com. You can call this anything you want as well. It could be east, west, north, south. It really doesn't matter, whatever you want to use. But I'm telling it to use my data center. Here is my device. This is my physical big IP in that data center. And of course, I've enabled virtual server discovery. Virtual server discovery has to be used here. And why not? And I'm going to talk a little bit about why not in a minute. So let's go ahead and provision this first declaration. Now, if you haven't used VS Code, highly recommend it. It is the best. You can see here there's this object which is part of the F5 extension that I've installed here. You can kind of see it. I actually searched for it's right here. I actually installed this. This whole thing took me about 2 minutes to set up. I installed this extension, and now I can communicate directly to my big IP through this F5, if you want to call it a button. I'm connecting to this F5 big IP. You can actually see the logs. You can actually see this. It's actually telling me the version, right? It's actually and showing me the different tasks, which you can click on here. And the community supports this, so you can contribute, you can open a GitHub on this tool. It is absolutely fabulous. Why I use this tool? Because here's actually my file. This is actually the file here that I'm actually going to use. So this is the file. If I actually scroll up here, this is exactly what I want to do. Right click. You'll notice that I can post. That is pretty cool. You don't have to use Postman. Nothing wrong with Postman, but this tool is just the bomb. So I'm going to post this. You'll see there is my declaration posting. If there's an error, it'll tell me right away. Based on the logs, it's also going to give me the output that was posted. And that will pop up in this tool, as you can see right here. You can see I got 200 OK. Tells me exactly what was posted. I can actually look at that declaration. You can see that is the exact declaration that was posted. The user agent, the configuration. So I can also do, if I go back here to the F5 extension, you can see here's the tenant. Look at that. It actually tells me that actually that is the tenant. And if I want, I can actually go and expand that, delete that. That's a way to delete it. It doesn't delete the tenant. You actually cannot delete common, but it will clean up all the AS3 objects that were created, right? Super important, because trust me, it's not that easy to actually, if you wanted to remove something, this is the quickest way. You can also expand the tenant and then show the defaults, right? So you can see right here, right? That's what the tenant looks like right there. That's exactly what's configured on that tenant. I don't even have to go to big IP if I don't want, right? I can just look at the data center, which is right there. See, data center, and it has a server, and it's server right here, and it has already a connected device. That's the connected device. And that didn't actually take that long, and I deployed that through AS3. There's no virtual servers at this point. So you can actually put everything in one pipeline if you wanted to really do that. You could actually deploy the first one to common. That could be in the same JSON file as the second tenant. That's fine. For the purposes of this video, I wanted to kind of show it separately because I want to talk about some of the changes that's coming next. So now that we have our data center and server created, and I'm using Virtual Server Discovery, what Virtual Server Discovery will do is it will discover the created virtuals for LTM, and it will make them available as a pool member for the wide IP. But how do you create your LTM piece, all of your LTM piece, and have that added and discovered by Virtual Server Discovery if you're posting everything in one declaration? Before AS340, what would happen is that you created your virtual server and all the associated configuration objects that go with it. But the pool member hadn't been discovered yet because that takes say 5 to 10 seconds. So what would happen is that when it would try go and reference that pool member under the data center and server for GTM, you would get a 422 because it's not there. That's just how it works. So what we've actually done is we've actually added in AS340, we've actually added a 10 to 15 second delay. So it's going to take a few seconds to kind of catch on. And you see, this is the biggest thing right here. This is the virtual server, right? Reference this virtual server underneath the GTM pool, right? So it's the tenant. This is the domain name. It's saying use this pool. That's great. And then this is the virtual server. Now, I've abbreviated this configuration because I want to fit it all into one PowerPoint slide. But let's take a look at what it actually looks like. So I'm going to close this. I don't need to save that output because it's on the system. So this one's already been deployed. So now I'm going to go look at the second one. So the first thing that I'm doing, and I do apologize, it's a little long, but bear with me. This is the schema, so I'm validating the declaration against the schema. This is the schema version number because I'm using 40. Now, this is my tenant name, so I'm creating a tenant called Nginx Ingress. And this is the, if you want to call it, a description, as well as the virtual server name, right? So this is, instead of using service main, I'm actually using this tier, right? And so that's why you see Nginx.ingress and Nginx Ingress VS, which is the name of the virtual and the description of the virtual and the tenant. And that's what I'm actually referencing it to. There is my LTM IP address. I'm actually using an endpoint policy here. You don't have to. You can just use a pool if you want. I just decided to use an LTM, an endpoint policy because I wanted to do some L7 stuff. But again, it doesn't matter. Cookies default, I just kind of put it in here just to explicitly call it out. I'm using a basic profile. Again, I just put it in here because I like this example. It kind of gives you a nice examples, but these are defaults. I am using an WASP's auto tune policy. Sorry, that's a mouthful for me. I don't deal with security too much, but that I am pulling that in, and I'm pulling that from GitHub. So that is actually pretty cool. And then again, this is my simple pool, right? So here's my pool. I got one member in here just because I only have one Nginx Ingress controller instance. But again, you can add as many members there, or you can have CIS populate the members if you want to do that as well. Here's my simple endpoint policy. I'm not going to go into that basic. I'm just looking at the URI. Let me just minimize that. Here is my WAF policy. Like, you can pull that in. So I'm adding the WAF policy as well. Now, remember, there's nothing on the system. So AS3 has to go and fetch, or Big IP has to go fetch this WAF policy. So it's going to take, however long it takes to fetch that. So let's just minimize that. But here is what's really important. This is my Nginx class of the GSLB domain. So the GSLB domain is important because what I'm doing is I'm defining my domain name. So my domain name is important. In this case, it's my FQDN for what this GTM is authoritative for. It's an A record, and I'm using ratio-based. So this is cafe.example.com. I specify my pool, and then I call the pool. So when I call the pool here, here's the member, of course. And then, of course, this is the virtual server discovery right here. This is where I reference the virtual server. So this is a string currently, and it's a string currently in 41 as well. I want to use. I want to just use a reference since we know what that is. I'm actually asking the development team to add that. And so that may be coming 42. But I'd like to shorten this and just use a use string just to simplify that, because that actually does make sense. But as of right now, it's a string. So I'm referring to the virtual server here. So you'll notice that the GSLB pool and the LTM is getting created in the same declaration that I'm going to post. And so you can kind of see that all there. So why don't we go ahead and Control A again. So you can see right now that I don't have an Nginx tenant. There's nothing on Big IP. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to post that to AS3. Now, this is a live demo, so this should be fine. It's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to go and fetch the updated policy for the WAF. It's going to associate the WAF, and it's going to create all the objects. But what you will see is you will see it come up. Shouldn't time out, should work fine. But that firewall policy is actually quite big. So we can actually go and see here on the LTM side whether the tenant has been created. Okay, so there is our tenant. And let's take a look if our pool member is there. Okay, so our pool member is actually up, which is actually really nice. There's the pool member. So if I actually select on that, that's exactly correct. That's my pool member. And so the monitor is working. Now, has the GTM stuff been created? And there's my wide IP. Wow, that is pretty cool. So that wide IP is there. That pool member is there. So if I click on here, there should be, let's go to the, let's just go to the wide IP. Yep, there it is right there. And there's the pool member. and that should be the pool member, which is Nginx pool. And if I look at members, there it is right there. That right there is the member that I have from my AS3 declaration, which is exactly what I want there. And so that all worked with a single declaration, but there is a few tricks there. You just have to give it a little bit of time so that virtual server discovery can kick in, of course, and obviously so that it can load some other stuff. But while it's loading like the WAV file and stuff like that, it'll come back. Now you can see here, there actually is the 200 OK, and there is actually the response time. So actually it took around 35 seconds. Just to be honest, I believe it's around 35 seconds. So actually not too bad. You can actually see there is my response right there. And you'll notice in VS Code, the new tenant shows up, which is now really nice because it actually gives me the configuration. And if I want to see the entire configuration, I could actually expand that to actually show me all the defaults, which is what it will do. You can kind of see now it's giving me all those defaults, which is actually a lot of information, more than what I ever need, but it has given it to me. So to recap, what we did here is that we actually created both GTM and the LTM objects all in one single declaration with a simple post using VS Code extension. So this is new. Obviously the prerequisite is AS340. I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know if this is useful, and if you're thinking about using this or deploying this with your GTM and LTM resources. Also, if you like this, make sure you're subscribed. If you like this, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see other cool and interesting things, please let me know. You can just open an issue, send me an email. You can also reach out to me through GitHub. There's many different ways how you can contact me, and I can then go ahead and create that. Have a lovely Thanksgiving, and we will chat to you soon.